Okay, I'll go back into the presentation now. There you go.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So I'm an artist who's interested in traditional art, such as calligraphy, basketry, weaving, Asian brush arts. And I think I'm really interested in Asian art, and it shows a lot in my work because I'm interested in minimalism and Buddhism, and you will see that a lot happening in my work. So I put my slides in chronological order with the latest, whatever I'm doing now, and going back in time to show you like what I did over a specific period of time, but not way back in history. So this is the latest what I did, like fish traps on both sides, traditional basket with the Japanese eye, and some random weaving and looping. Next slide, please. Before that, I really wanted to learn basketry so badly, but I couldn't find anybody who can teach me with natural fibers. But I found a wonderful lady who was doing wire weaving. So I took a workshop with her for a couple of 2 days, intensive workshop in wire weaving, which was very close to basketry, to what I wanted to do. But luckily enough, later on, I found a workshop in natural weaving, and I took that as well. So I'm very glad that I took both because they complement each other. Next slide, please. I'm an artist who's interested in politics, and I show that in many of the pieces that perhaps you will see now while I am working with these slides. So this is when Roe versus Wade overturned. I did this piece. My friend did the buttons, and he was giving them away. On the button, you will see, like on the right side, there is a hanger, and it says "really" with a question mark. So I use them when I use the wire technique that I learned from my teacher in making a larger hanger embedded into this piece of wood. And I use my skills in weaving to create almost a body of blood with a drop of blood hanging from the wire. Just talking about going back in history into using the wire for inducing abortion, and the piece is called "Really." Of course, I took his permission in using the buttons. Next slide. And this is another one. I had this red weaving for quite a while, and I was wondering what to do with it. So I embedded chicken wire between 2 pieces of weaving, black and red, and pieces of hedgehog. I'm sorry, what is it? Porcupine. I'm sorry, porcupine, African porcupine, and New England porcupine pieces. You can see all the way to the right, and details as well. Again, talking about the GOP and the bloody elephant in the room. Next slide, please. This piece is dedicated to my best friend, Lynn, who is a teacher and a mentor, and just to say thank you for all the work that, because the sculpture idea, as much as I was really aspiring to do sculpture, I don't think I could have done it without her. So she helped me a lot in many ways. So this piece is just to say thank you for everything that she did and her help and contribution in creating me to become the sculptor that I am now. Thank you, Lynn. She's here with us. Next slide, please. This is a number of pieces that I did. Actually, this is just one of them, which are functional pieces that I created a light that will go on the wall, and then I create these really beautiful pieces with the beautiful, more like Asian scenery that on pieces of wood, and then you hang the piece of wood on the wall with the light behind it, and then you can control it with the remote control. You can switch it on and off, or it can be actually more electric. So there's a button that you can switch it on and off at nighttime. And I use resin at the base and natural grass at the base as well. But I use a lot of paper collage for my work. But you can see that I really love working with wood and cut the wood to the style that I want. Next piece, please. I'm originally from the Middle East, so Arabic is my first language, and I work as an Arabic interpreter at UMass. So in 2 years ago, I got a grant from Mass Culture to study Arabic calligraphy, and I studied two fonts. One is the Diwani, which is this one, and the other font is Kufi, which is the following piece that you will see after this one. And this quote comes from a book about bamboo. It's about racism. It's a wonderful book. And this quote, it talks about how hardy the bamboo is that can survive no matter where. You can cut a piece and throw it anywhere. It will thrive. It will survive. It will. But then this young kid who came from the Philippines and he went to Kuwait, he could not survive there because of all the racism and all the difficulties. And he went back actually to the Philippines, even though his father was Kuwaiti, but his mom was a Filipina. And unfortunately, he could not really make it there, even though he's practically Kuwaiti. And I added with watercolors. I added the leaves of the bamboo plant. You can see all the details and butterflies here and there. On the back of this piece, you will see the painting of the bamboo. If you don't mind, the next slide. So this is the back of the same piece of wood. It will show you that this is a traditional Chinese painting of the bamboo. So one side is the calligraphy, the other side is the bamboo. Usually when I put it in a show near to me, I will have a plant of a bamboo next to it, to show the marriage of the real plant with. But if it's far away, I don't, because somebody has to take care of the bamboo and water it, and I get concerned about the plant. Next slide, please. This is another one. This is a piece of wood that was circular completely, but then got broken and cut. So I made it stand on its feet. And there is another quote by a famous Lebanese philosopher. Perhaps you're familiar with him. He wrote the book, The Prophet, Khalil Gibran. And he talks about the truth, that things might change. The moon might come and go, or the waves of the sea might ebb and flow, but the truth doesn't change. The truth is always the same, and I love that, especially at these times where you don't know where the truth is. So I made this piece about it, and it's called Truth. Next piece, please. This is a lovely piece because I wanted it to look like a musical instrument, and I used pieces of the inside of a piano with that, like the hammers at the end. I glued them after I cut all the sides, like almost like a piano keys, and it's really a representation of the lyrics of a poem by a very famous Lebanese singer called Fairuz. On my website, there is a link. Actually, you can click on it. You can listen to the lyrics, and you can see the translation of what she's talking about. It's a very, very beautiful song talking about migration of people, why they leave from one place to another place. And it's the beauty of Lebanon, all this beauty, and why people would leave a beautiful place to go somewhere else. It's beautiful, very poetic, but at the same time it's sad, talking about all these stars falling down on top of the hills. And it's a night scenery, but then have to make it dark and show the stars without using dark colors. So it was a little bit of a challenge for me. But at the same time, I managed to show that somehow with the gold. Next slide, please. This one is at the Schwamp Mill now on show. And it's a series of blocks, and each block has two words, the opposites of each other. It's like dichotomy. Like one slide says hatred, and the one side hatred, the other side is love. One is war, the other one is peace. And they're weighted. So each one of them, it shows you the importance. And the heaviest weight is the bottom one, because it's talking about one side is freedom, the other side is slavery, because I think that's the most important thing for me. You have to be free to make free decisions before you are, before you can do or achieve other things. To be able to vote or to be able to be happy, you really need to be free. Before achieving that, none of the other things could happen. That's why it's the heaviest weight comes with the lowest one. Next one, please. This one, it was really a product of COVID after being, especially I work in the health system, and you see some people getting vaccinated and some not vaccinated, and they made it such a political issue. And I could see people, you know, I remember at the beginning when we had like yellow ribbon across some of the rooms. We couldn't even go into some of the rooms of the patients. I was just hoping that all of this will end and there'll be a new day and there'll be a new dawn and everything will end and we're gonna have good days to come. It was a very hopeful piece. Next, please. This is a wonderful piece in partnership with my daughter. She did actually the origami of the dragon in the center. I don't know if you can see the dragon and the reflection of the dragon. And I did all the other cuttings of the papers. And it's on display at the Natick Mall with the help of my friend Lynn Simmons as well. We did this one with all the cuttings, and you can see actually the perspective with the size of the ladder and how high it is. Next, please. Key Witness is another piece that I did between the impeachments of Mr. Trump, the first impeachment, the second impeachment. The key is all the way to the right, and I'm just wondering which key is going to fit that lock and open the lock and give us, reach what we really want, what everybody wants. Like you are somebody, somehow somebody will. I don't know. Everybody is each one of us is a witness to these times, and each one of us is obliged to have a say or have a statement or say something. Everybody is really. If we all, I come from Syria. Is that enough to tell you what we are witnessing now? If not everybody has a voice and everybody says something, we're gonna end up having a system like what we have in the Middle East. And it is horrifying for me. And that's why perhaps I feel like we need to do and say something. Next, please. This is a great piece that I did labeling the word whore in many languages because it's very easy for us to label women. If you look at what's happening in Iran now, just for women who did not cover her hair properly, it's very easy to label and judge women. So each label of these tags carries the word whore in different language. I wrote it in many languages on both sides. So if it flips by mistake, you can still read that word. And they dress women and they make them look beautiful and elegant and wonderful. But then it's very easy to trash them and they become an object. But inside at the bottom, you see there is a light because after all, a woman is a human being and my light sees the light in that human being. Next, please. Rising Phoenix is another piece of weaving, very long weaving, maybe like 12 meters. It's a double, and I had, maybe this is like one of the first ones that I was like fed up with my weavings because they're all lengthy and I don't know what to do with them. I put chicken wire in between and I twisted it and I decorated it. It looks like a phoenix or a dragon. And I'm really happy with it. I managed to sell it as well. Next. This is another one that was really interesting because Chinese painting, but it wasn't in watercolors, which is traditionally what it should be, but it was in acrylic. And I mounted the silk on a piece of vine and I stretched it. And I cut the silk so it looks like a waterfall coming down into the ground. So that was very unique because it was different in medium and in presentation and in technique. And I found it really interesting. That's why I included it in this presentation. Next.
Beta, 1 more minute, please.
Sure. This is the last piece that I want to show you, which was very Japanese. Every new year, they ask people to hang things from like paper and write their wishes on trees. Instead, I used pieces of wood and people wrote lots of interesting things. And then I combined them all and I made a quilt, which is the next piece, the last piece. And you can see it here, I quilted it. So they're all combined together into one quilt. And at the first one, drops of hope, and here drops of hope stitched. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Nice. Nicely done. So thank you. To the audience, if you have questions, jot them down, and we'll have a Q&A session after the last presentation. So let's move on. Thank you, Beta. Appreciate it. Let's move on to the next presenter. Carla, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, take it away.
Okay, so I'm an experimenter at heart, and I always have this driving need to reinvent the wheel and to try and create something that's unique, that people haven't seen before. And one of my favorite ways of exploring ideas is to be given a prompt or a theme to work towards. So this piece was actually from a gallery prompt, and the word was ball that I had to respond to. And I tried 4 different ideas, but this is the one that stuck. And actually, I keep doing this series. And the strange thing is that I never considered myself a minimalist. The materials that I use really do come from experimentation and from, for instance, this piece from this prompt. And this ended up in a private property that they have their own Judaic temple. So the colors worked perfectly for that. You can go to the next one. This is another example, just smaller. I didn't put in the photos of big installations because it's really hard to read from a distance. And I tend to put these in much larger groupings, but this shows you all the different kind of details. I consider myself a non-traditional sculptor, and I work in a lot of different media, but they're almost always all on plexiglass, which came as a result from having a really devastating flood that wiped out nearly all of my work from college all the way up until 1999. So I figured plastic was a little less destructible. I think some of this work will survive an apocalypse. I don't know. Okay, so next slide. This is an example of work that crosses between painting and drawing. And again, it's on plexiglass with resin. I didn't do a big long series of this work. I'd like to someday. There's maybe 10 pieces in total from this series, small series. You can go to the next slide. The nice thing about this is that the piece on the left is actually a detail from the previous slide. But I work with a lot of designers and art placement firms, and they decided that they wanted this work for Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines for the outdoor solarium. But we had to make sure that it was waterproof. So they took details of the work and then had it printed on glass. So this is in the picture on the right. And I don't have a really good picture of the installation. They never send you photos of how the work looks installed. This happened to be a photo from someone's iPhone that I knew who happened to be taking the cruise on Harmony of the Seas and sent me a photo of it. So it's actually much bigger. You can go to the next slide. This is a piece from a series called Aquamarine, and it's more of the painting heavy versions of my work. And this piece also was reprinted on glass and is also on Harmony of the Seas, right near a bar. So I like to think of people, getting really drunk and getting into this. There's a lot of aspects of layering in my work, and a lot of what you're seeing is actually light and shadow that's cast in the work, and the pieces stand an inch away from the wall. So when light comes through the front of the panel, it's creating shadow and light patterns on on the back of the piece against the wall. You can go to the next. And this is another piece from the Aquamarine series. And all of those colors actually come from one paint. And then as I'm working it, it gets broken up with water, and it sort of breaks down into all of these different colors. So between working with resin, which is, obviously a liquid before it's set, and then the kind of painting technique that I do, it's very unpredictable what will happen. It's kind of like juggling honey and hoping it lands where it does. But part of creating this is looking at what happened with the previous layer and then figuring out where to go with the next technique that I do. You get to go forward. This is a series that I do that is called Seafoam series, and it's drawing. So there's like hundreds of thousands of polka dots drawn on the front and the back of the piece. And then it gets frosted. And then I go back into the piece and paint resin. And I have to time how firm the resin's getting so that I can then go back in and create these sort of swirling patterns in the pieces. Like you could see in the upper left corner, it's not quite as swirly as it is in the center. And that has to do with the difference in timing of when I was able to get the swirling done. So I have to be very mindful of my time when working on these. But the nice thing about this series is because this is a water-based resin that I use compared to the more caustic resin that I use, the hot resin. So I can work on this during the winter when the windows are all closed up and it doesn't matter where I work. Whereas with ripple effect, I need to have a warmer environment. I have to make sure that the resin is warm. I need to have plenty of air circulation. Just, to protect my health, because I work with so much resin that, I don't want to kill myself. Okay, you can go on to the next. This is also seafoam. So what happens is that every single panel actually looks clear and frosted with the white ink. And the color comes from a second color panel behind it. And in this case, I wanted to make a sculpture in the round. And I had a blue light inside of the piece. And eventually after this show, these pieces became wall pieces. Sorry, my dinger just went off. So I like the fact that these can go from a very dimensional standing piece and then back to wall work. In each of the panels in this photo are 4 foot by 5 foot. So I did a show in Brooklyn where it was 6 panels on the wall plus these 4 standing panels, and it took a year to the day to finish. And in fact, I finished the show at 4 o'clock in the morning, packed it up and drove it into Brooklyn at 6 o'clock. So yeah, it was a long, tiring couple of days to install. Okay, you can go to the next. These are 2 foot by 4 foot versions, but it gives you an idea of the different kinds of patterning that I can do with just by drawing. This is from the 2014 Sea Grant that I did for Yukon and NOAA. And I went somewhere along the Long Island Sound one day per month for a full year and recorded the day and then did a drawing responding to that location. And the color, they're hand mixed colors that I pulled from a single pixel from photographs from each location that day. Okay, you can go to the next. This is a piece that I just finished, and each of the panels are 15 by 15. And I'm getting ready to pack that up and send to a show in Taipei, Taiwan. And the title of the piece is Raindrop on 12 Beaches. And again, the color comes from a photo from each of the different beaches a single pixel that then is hand mixed to record that color. I'm really excited about this show. It'll be the first chance I'm getting to show in Taipei, but even bigger. It was sorry, it was supposed to start the month before COVID shut everything down, and they kind of saw this happening. So the show was delayed, and rescheduled 6 or 7 times. So finally, it's going up in November of this year. Okay, you can go to the next screen. And this is just another version. Sometimes I end up with plexiglass that is damaged, and this is an example of trying to work around that. So on the bottom, you can see there's sort of almost a straight line of resin, and there was a huge scratch in the piece. And rather than taking it back to the plexi place that I purchased it, I decided, because I figured they were just going to throw it away, and I really don't like throwing things away, that I would work around it. And happy to say this piece actually sold. Yay. So good for reclaiming. Okay, go ahead. Like I said, I really hate throwing things away. And in the production of my work on plexiglass, there's always leftover remnants. There's overpours of resin. And so that's where installation work comes in. And what I try to do in any of my installation work, the main feature is that it's using reclaimed, repurposed materials. I try to reduce the amount of stuff that goes into the trash. And the material is a really beautiful material. It's just a matter of manipulating it. So this one was a painting I did, and it wasn't going where I liked it, and I ended up breaking it up. And I started using and playing around with all of the overpours of resin and then adding to it. And I was really happy with this. This was the first installation I did. And as people walk around it, it creates enough of a wind that the pieces start to move and swing around. And so it has this feeling of ice flows. So this is called the Ice Goddess. You can go to the next. I was asked to do an installation for the Beacon Institute for Rivers and Estuaries. And we got into a big fight about the materials because they said, well, you're using plastic and we're all about the environment. But what I tried to point out is that every artist has a carbon footprint, and my materials aren't any different than acrylic paint or the mining of oil paint. And in fact, all of the materials in this installation were reclaimed materials. So like the greenish color is from the end rolls of Christmas napkins that were that I was able to get a hold of. And the bottom darker green is from Hanukkah wrapping paper. And the whole piece was about the endangered species that are in the Hudson River, and they're Xerox copies of the endangered fish. And the idea behind it was, is this the only way that we're going to eventually know these species is through copies and not be able to experience the original. You can go to the next. And this is the same piece. Before it was hung in Roca, and then this version of it is at the Dorsky Museum. And what I really love about installation work is that it adapts to the various places, and it's always different no matter where you hang it. And eventually this piece sold and is at a cancer center in Orlando, Florida. Okay, you can go ahead.
Carla, 1 more minute, please.
Oh, okay. All right, let's go. All right, we can go through that. That's all right. This is reclaimed material from an old greenhouse. Okay, we can go. Sometimes I do outdoor work. The left is using reclaimed pieces of plastic for a study for the one on the right. Go ahead. This is reclaimed pieces from the production of COVID shields. All right, we can go ahead. I tried to not let anything go in the trash. This series came from, I had a bunch of ripple effect pieces that were scratched or had animal fur stuck in them. And so what's the best way of getting rid of animal fur? It's using spray paint. And this became its own series. I can go to the next. And lately I've been working on TikTok. So if you want to run that, we'll be done. Oh, I don't know why there's no sound to it, but that's okay. So these are close-ups of the black and white work, which is all about a memory of riding on a boat on the Vltava River in Prague, and it started to rain at night. And as we were going underneath the bridge, it formed a perfect row of circular ripples in the water surface, and it also was reflecting the street lights. So as you can see, I work back and forth between a lot of different styles, but I try to keep water as the theme that ties everything together.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Carla. Wonderful. So we'll have the questions at the end. So thanks again, and we'll move right along to the next presenter. And that's going to be Sean. Are you ready?
Ready.
Take it away.
So this is my cheesy handout that one of my graphic designer friends made for me. So I'm a master sculptor now as of last year when she made this brochure. You can go to the next one, Zvi. So this is kind of the last 20 years, kind of oldest to newest. Just a little background about myself. I graduated with a BFA, and now I have an MA, but I concentrated in bronze foundry and glass blowing with a photography minor. So this series is from just after September 11th. I lost my sister-in-law at the World Trade, and I did a series of sculptures made from packing materials that electronics come in, VCRs, TVs, stuff like that. And the kind of fragility and delicateness of that styrofoam in making architectural forms and then casting them in bronze, I thought was kind of poignant at the time, kind of help my family heal a little bit. And these are about 15 or 18 inches tall, depending which one in the series. Next slide, please. Then after that, I moved into some kind of found object studies as budgetary restrictions. One back one, there you go. Oh, there we go. There we go.
Sorry.
That's all right. Next one. And so I was doing found object studies just because the bronze casting was becoming cost prohibitive at the time. So I was finding a lot of kind of detritus as I traveled around New England. And this is some kind of smaller works ranging from a couple inches tall to, 10 or 15 inches tall. The one on the left is affectionately known as Tim in my house. He's made of engine parts. And then the kind of ballerinas on the top right are from vice grips. And the bottom rocket ship is a corkscrew, a door spring, and a door handle, kind of a guard. Next slide, please. And then I continue with the kind of found object studies and repurposing things and upcycling them into different types of tower forms. The one on the left, Phoenix Tower, is a series of ashtrays. I worked for a general contractor for a number of years, helping him out. And one point we were in a kind of an apartment building and are getting rid of all the ashtrays that were in front of the elevators. They're kind of a half moon shape, as you see there. And the top was a clamshell that would open and shut. You'd put your cigarette in it before you got on the elevator. And our job was to get rid of them because it was becoming a non-smoking facility. And I said, oh, I can do something with these. So I repurposed them into this tower. The middle tower are trash can lids and blown glass kind of garden globes that have been mirrored. And the one on the right, the Helix Tower, is plywood forms. And I did a whole series of these in kind of different arrangements and groupings. And it was just a basic kind of X shape that I had stacked on top of each other. Next slide, please. Continuing with that kind of upcycled theme, I'm a public school teacher, and oftentimes I find inspiration in kind of interesting, mundane places. The inspiration for this was the liners for colored pencil class size packs. Each pack was divided with cardboard by the color, and when the pack was empty or I took it out of the box, you could take that cardboard divider and bend it around in these different shapes. And I like the shapes in the cardboard form, but I thought, as always, I tend to make things bigger. And at the time, our library was getting rid of a lot of library shelving. So I repurposed a library shelving and made it into the forms that I had made in the cardboard of the colored pencil containers. Next slide, please. And those are about, that's about a 3 foot tall by 5 foot wide by about 4 feet deep sculpture. Next slide, V, please.
Hey, wake up.
Thank you. And then back to some, back one, V.
Hey, what are you doing? We'll talk about this until he goes back.
See, can you go back, please? Just one slide. Perfect. So this one on the left is 2 different views of it. I did a couple different size versions of this. The one on the left is about a 4 foot version that I did as kind of a model. And the one on the right is about 10.5 feet tall. And you can kind of see there's 2 heads on it. And I named it couple for the way they're kind of interacting with each other. The one on the right is also about 10 feet and change tall. And I got into doing a series based on nature, forms in nature, and seed pods in particular at the time. And this is the very loosely abstracted form of Nigella damascena, which is love in a mist. It's a certain type of flower that has these kind of really interesting kind of stamens on the flower and the seed pod. Next. And then kind of continuing on that theme of the couple, I made another sculpture called Intertwined on the left. And that one is all hand hammered steel. And that I made in kind of 2 separate sheets. I cut it out flat and then hammered them till they kind of bent and met, and then welded the 2 halves together. And the one on the right is about 4 feet tall without the base. And it's another one that's 2 halves that have been hand hammered and then welded together. And that one also has a cast resin element to it. There's a kind of a little abstract face there to make it kind of look like someone dancing. Next slide, please. And then the one on the left, Hemerocallis stamen trio, is loosely based on the stamens of a lily flower. And then I saw kind of an interesting shape from a 70s sculpture magazine that I kind of made my own as the base of it. I thought it worked well. And inside that, I've moved from kind of the red, safety red paint of some of my outdoor sculptures, so they really popped out in the green of the outdoor space, to a rust patina on the outside. And this one has a red interior on the base. And then the one in the middle, Grevillea abstraction, is based on a flower called the spider flower that has similar kind of stamens and appendages like the love in a mist from the previous slide. And that one is, I don't really like the base on this one, but it's what I had at the time for the show. It's actually a washing machine tub, but I've since made a different base for it that's more fitting with the sculpture. And then the one on the right, I moved for a kind of a hot second into some more geometric forms. And this one's called Tri-Spar, and I painted it red again because I thought it would kind of stand out in the space when I installed it. And these are all between 5 and 7 feet tall. I think the Hemerocallis one is about 8 feet tall. Next slide, please. This one is called Seeds of Industry. On the left is a very small, it's about 20 inches tall, little mock-up I did for a call to art proposal for Cummings Center in Beverly. I was one of the finalists there, but they ultimately ended up putting a ocean buoy there instead of my sculpture, which is a bit of a disappointment, but they still paid me handsomely for the proposal. But ideally it was going to be about 18 or 19 feet tall. And it was based on the site that has a lot of industry in it. And so I used a lot of inspiration from different pieces of kind of gears and detritus from the mills that were there before that they've left in the parking lot, and added kind of my own twist of the kind of current Sears I was working on with those kind of flowing tops on it. Next, please. And this piece on the left, Leap, is basically, as many of us do, we reuse our scraps around the shop if we have them. And the figure I made quite a while ago out of scraps from my shop, and then I had another bunch of scraps from another project, and I made this tower that this person is kind of leaping off of. And then Volpace or Vixen on the right is another piece made from scrap steel, and they are kind of the cutoffs from one of my other projects, and I thought the way they went together was just perfect, so there it is. Next slide, please, V. And this one is about 3 years ago. We're getting kind of closer to where my current work is. And this one's called Dualis. It's about 10.5 feet tall. And this one, if you're looking at this kind of 3 different views, the middle view kind of tells a story that the whole thing is kind of counterbalanced and supported by this ball in the middle that I got from a ironworks company out in Wisconsin. And then the rest of it, I've all fabricated the whole thing with different structure inside to kind of hold it, and it stands up on that base. And I really like the color and the kind of shape of this one, how it kind of interacts with each other. This one's very kind of similar to very loosely figurative work that I tend to do sometimes. Next slide, please. And this one is a piece I did last year. And this one's called Tray. It's about 9 feet tall. And in the middle are some cast resin blocks. And they're actually from another sculpture that I had participated in with an artist named Howard Bentray, who the sculpture is named after, who passed away recently. And kind of a tribute to him and the work I did with him. In the early 2000s, I worked for him, and we did a lot of, you can see on the right, some projects that I've done with him. The top one is a town square in Warrington, England. And those tall sculptures are cast bronze with cast glass tops on them. And then a large kind of a looking fountain in the middle that had a bunch of cast glass elements in it. And then the bottom left on the right side, those kind of towers with the clear glass tops or bottoms, depending how you look at it, is a large scale installation we did at the Tacoma Museum of Glass in Tacoma. And they had water piped into them that would go up and down based on the tides. And we made these kind of, I guess, bubble screens in them that would do these swirling motions when the water came in and out of them. It was kind of a neat interactive sculpture that the water would flow over the tops and down the sides, and very, very hands-on. And then the bottom one is another work by Howard that I was participating in. And that's about 5 feet tall. And there's 2 pieces of cast glass with leaded centers covering some of the glass. And one of the projects that I did with him out in California for Siebel Systems, we used to do a lot of big, large scale public works, as you see. And we would cast the glass in the Czech Republic. And at one point we didn't get the glass back in time through customs to have it finished for the installation at Siebel Systems. So we cast resin. And then a year later, when we got the glass finished, we went back out and uninstalled the resin and reinstalled the glass. And Howard threw all the resin out, but I kept 3 of them, and I've had them for 20 years now, just about. And I've always wanted to do something with them, so I've repurposed them into my own sculpture here. And this one lights up at night. It's got solar lights inside of it, so when it gets dark out, it lights up for about 8 hours or so. Next slide, please. And this is a piece I just finished about a month ago. You can kind of see it, I guess, concept to finish here. You know, you start with the sketches many times, and then I do a lot of little maquettes in like a cardstock with just Scotch tape. And then from there, I will scale it up with the pentagraph. And then I'll start making a larger pattern. This one, in fact, I made a larger, another cardstock pattern that was life size, and then used that as my pattern for cutting out the steel. And then I added acrylic elements to this one, where I melted and molded the acrylic elements to fit into the metal structure. And then also you can see on the right, I added lights in this one as well, solar lights as well. So this one lights up at night. This one's currently at Pingree School at the Flying Horse Show. Next slide, please. And this is a series I've been working on for about a year. The left and the right are two in the series. The one on the left, you can kind of tell there's some tape on it. This was a paper, I guess, preliminary of it. I now have metal, but I call it Wave for lack of a better title, I guess. And I've done a series of these that are kind of, I'll say, exactly the same, but totally different. And the one on the right has a pentagon base. I have another one with a hexagon base that I'm working on finishing. They're smaller works for me. They're about maybe close to 2 feet tall. And I like the look of them in the white paper. So I've painted the metal ones white as well, which is kind of a stretch for me. But I like the way the shadows reflect on them. And I like the way they look in the round. So I'm going to kind of continue on with some similar series and finish this one out, I think. Next slide, please.
Sean, 1 more minute, please.
Perfect. And then I think this might be my last slide. I've been doing some kind of smaller works, as I said. The one on the left is cast material, like you break your arm, you need a cast. So it's a cast material, kind of a plaster of Paris and mesh cloth over foam. In this one, I hope to make larger. And the ones on the right there are a ceramic series I've been doing, kind of ocean kind of forms, loosely based on some phytoplankton and some other things in the ocean, since the oceans are a big topic in water at the moment. And I've done a series of about maybe 12 of these, but these are just 3 that was just in a recent show. And that's my time, I think. And I think that's my last slide, Zvi.
It is. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you have strengths for one more presentation, I'll set the timer on and I'll start now. Okay, so I'll focus on, my presentation could be very interesting or very boring. I'm not sure which one of that's going to happen. I will focus on material and that I've been interacting with, and also some homegrown technique and discoveries. So hopefully it's going to be of interest. So let me start with number 1. I do work with wood, either seasons or not seasoned, either reclaimed or not reclaimed. The first 3 on the left side, the beauty, the relationship, and layers. These are chunks of wood that I have seasoned myself, and you see that they're not perfect. But some of the beauty comes out of the imperfection, and I like that. If you want some perfection, you can go to a store, you buy a chunk of wood that has been processed and cleaned and stuff, and the sculpture question on the right side represent that type of work, which is pristine and clear and nice on all sides. I do work with greenwood as well. Unfortunately, from time to time, trees die. The left one was a beautiful weeping cherry tree, which I saw immediately, 1 heart, 2 people and 1 heart together. And on the right side, hemlock, one of my hemlock died, and I kind of dissociated the bark from the tree and loaded with glue and stain so it would stick and not fall apart. So it became a flower, a big flower. I do collect also tree branches, and I try to do something with them. On the left side, the same weeping cherry tree. There were 2 branches, 1 of 2, 1 of 3 limbs, and I connected them together into a transition, 3 to 2. The outlier, I split the branches in half, loaded them with varnish and stuff, made the middle one black, so that's my outlier. The rightmost side, I did it just recently. I got a very interesting species from a friend that had an interesting twist in that, and it looked like a totem pole to me from the minute I saw it, and I created a totem pole, the evolution of man from the bottom to the top, and beyond that, who knows. So that wood branches. From time to time, I do glue together different species of wood and then carve into them when the goal is to create something that has diversity in it, which is the left side diversity, and on the right side fusion, meaning that you fuse together societies, people, behaviors and stuff. You have to be careful doing that because it's kind of hard to project forward what color a specific limb will come through. But if you don't care about, if you're not married to any design ahead of time, the outcome may be quite pleasing. I love plywood. You can actually buy a high quality, high density plywood that is fun to work with. And the reason is you put together a couple of layers and then you start to sculpt around it. You have the predictability of the grain structure, right? The grain, there's no grain, but you know if you drill in to a certain level, you're going to get a different layer. So you have to plan ahead how much you want to drill and what layer you want to expose. So the left one is the light and shadow. So it was I made a chunk of about, I think 3 or 4 layers of 3/4 of an inch plywood, high quality plywood. And that came out pretty consistent. The stepping down was about 5 layers and it was exactly suitable for the purpose that I wanted to see 2 leaves integrated together and stepping down from one position to the other. The yin and yang came a little bit scary. I don't know why, but it's fun to play with the layers. And the far right one was really interesting. I read a book about typical kind of societies based on different behaviors, called them earth and water. I decided to do something with that topography. And if you work with plywood, it's really nice to create mountains and valleys and stuff. So in that case, I created some terrain, and then the lower terrain I stained with light blue and then flooded with clear epoxy. So it gave it really a nice look, a nice flowing look. And it's if you can see the shape, it's the shape of a woman embedded inside a terrain. So plywood, wonderful material. I recently discovered a wonderful wood, which the brand name is Cold Band Hardwood. So they take hardwood, they put it into autoclave with steam and compress it to about 75% of its original size, which gives you the aptitude to bend it afterwards. Once you moist it and water it, you can bend it and it will not break. So the left one, the unfinished, was my first try with the wood, and it was not that successful and it broke down. So I wanted to do something that looked like the parenthood on the right side of it, but I couldn't, so I made something else. Lesson is don't be married to one narrative, be very open to what happened in the wood, what happened in the process, and react to that. Parenthood was a more successful try of that wood, and you can see that one of the branches really goes all the way around 180 degrees. Likewise for keyword. The last one, the last try with that material was challenging to me because I use burl, what's her name? Never mind. When you compress wood, the compression may not be equal on all parts of the limb. So if you cut them the right size and the right length, that's still not balanced completely one against the other. So there must be some other way to do that, because I took a huge piece and cut it into strips and made the event one on the right side, but you see it's not completely balanced. So I still need to learn about that a little bit more. I do work with scrap and burned wood, some scraps on the left side. I call it resume, like, like the shaman would carry the teeth of the animals, whatever, and that was their resume. So that's my resume of the work I worked before. Two fish was a burned oak tree that looked like two trees and two fish, and I like that. And I do collect scrap. So whenever my scrap box overflows, I make something out of it. So the In Control was an attempt to do that. Wood and metal, I do work with both of them sparingly whenever the narrative calls for it. Frame of mind on the left side, the metal frame was really something that fed into the narrative of frame of mind. Things you think or wish you could do, but sometimes you cannot. And the space-time symmetry on the right side was actually a model. The easiest for me to do that model was on over a sheet of metal. And then I made another copies of it made of epoxy clay, which I'll talk about it in a second, and wood. Epoxy clay, a wonderful material. If you're familiar with epoxy glue, there are part A and part B, you mix them up and then it hardens within either 5 minutes or 5 hours, whatever. So same principle with that clay. You have two parts of clay, A and B, you mix them up, then you have 3 hours to work with, and then they harden, they cure, they don't move after 3 hours, and they completely become stone-like after 24 hours. While it's being curing, you need to have some sort of
You have 1 minute.
okay. No, it can be 14 minutes. Anyhow.
Oh, you have 14 minutes. Sorry, I thought it was 10.
No, 14. That's okay. Thank you. So you need to have a skeleton because otherwise it will limp around. So you need to have a skeleton, but once it dries out, you can do wonderful things with it. You can patina it like memory and other things. I do work with epoxy clay and glass. There's no problem to glue between epoxy clay and glass, though the problem may come elsewhere, and I'll show you in a second. So these are different collection of epoxy clay and plexiglass on the left side, then on plexiglass in the middle, and then Parenthood on the right side. I do work with metal wire. On the left side, I connect them through a smaller gauge wire. This is a fractal S, everything made out of shape of S's. And on the right side, I was playing with heat gun and heat shrink material. You know what heat shrink is? You put two wires together and a heat shrink around them, and you put the heat on them, and it shrinks and holds the parts together. So I did that and cover everything with epoxy, so it's going to look with epoxy clay, so it's going to look nice and smooth. Wire and epoxy clay too. I like working with copper wire on the right side caught in time, and the combination of it, it's really very elegant in my taste, my thinking. Sea glass. I like to walk on the beaches and clean the beaches of sea glass and do something with it. It's very, very challenging to glue pieces of sea glass together. So you have to go through 3 steps when you do that. It's very tedious. You have to use crazy glue at the beginning. Then once that dries out, you have to use glass powder and 5 minutes epoxy to create a support over that area that was glued. And then once the entire structure is completed, you encapsulate everything with 30 minutes epoxy. And then you do a couple of layers. And please do not make the mistake of leaving the piece outside next to the window when the sun comes in, because over time it will melt it down unless you support it properly. So the one on the right is glass and epoxy clay. On the right, politically correct, which broke down a few times, but then at the end I had to put a support underneath, and now it's stable. Sea glass and wire. Not much revelation here. I I use 5 minutes epoxy glue to adhere it on one side, and then turn it the other way around and glue the other side so it's stable. If you want to do something more elaborate, like the flower heads I have on the right side, like a flower bouquet, you have to provide more support for the pieces of glass, not just one large gauge wire, but a thin one that goes and interleaved in between. Others, I do like to play with other material, and I recently tried the rope, and I feel that I can do much more with rope and epoxy clay. And the one on the right has wires and some man-made material that looks like nesting stuff. And the last one is, it's important to follow your narrative, but sometimes avoid is your narrative. And that should not be forgotten. On the left side, I call Tikkun Olam, and really the message are the silhouettes at the background. Tikkun Olam means fixing the world. And the idea is there are a network of people that with their good grace and good deed and good nature, they're holding up humanity. And the reality is also the same idea on the same, but sometimes you see, sometimes what is up front is not the entire narrative and message of what is to be seen. With that, I'm done. So thank you. And let's open up now the discussion and questions. You can unmute yourself and feel. And that's it. So I'm done. Stop sharing. There you go. All right, the floor is open.
Sean, do you have an idea of what the name of your piece is going to be before you start, or does it come after you're done?
I'm the worst at names, Pete.
Oh,
I often make it and have no idea until it's finished and someone asks me what the name is. and then I do a little, I mean, sometimes it comes easily, but I would say for the most part, in many years, I had untitled number 1, titled number 2, because there's a lot of my pieces, I guess my background when I was doing the foundry work and stuff, when I lived out west for a number of years working for art foundries. And I was doing a lot of really wildlife bronzes and figurative bronzes that were really close to reality. And I kind of went the opposite way into abstraction. And so I really want people to kind of interpret it. I don't want to give it too much meaning so that people have a set idea what it is. I want them to kind of look at it and try to read into it. So sometimes my titles are Spanish translations or something that's just really vague, or the name of a flower, and they have to kind of figure it out a little bit. So sometimes no rhyme or reason, really.
did you have a hard time transitioning from figurative to contemporary sculpting?
Yeah, I mean, I'd kind of always been in between, I guess, and I've kind of gone the one extreme, I guess, but I can still every once in a while, if someone has me do a commission, pull out my kind of making an eagle or a duck or a figurative work if I need to.
Thank you.
I have a
Hi, Rebecca.
question for Bida. I really love your weavings and how you added the chicken wire to make your Phoenix 3-dimensional. It was really, really cool, and congratulations on the sale. I'm wondering who was the person that taught you the wire basketry, and if you have any basketry people that you would suggest to take some lessons with.
Hannah Vogel is the lady that I took a class with. Our pieces were accepted in Auburn, New York. So we were exhibiting at the same time, both of us, and she was running a workshop for us at the same time. Her name is Hannah, H-A-N-N-A-H, and her last name is Vogel, V-O-G-E-L. I can pass that information to Zvi, and he can actually post it for everybody. But I'm sure you can find her work on Pinterest, everywhere, because what she does, she does these beautiful vessels of wire that are dipped in pulp paper, and after she pulls them out, she leaves them until they start changing color because of rust. So the metal starts to
Cool.
rust, and then you can change it changes the color of the paper. That's and it's and she has a little bit of a gloomy perspective on her work. It's about death and metamorphosis and stuff like that. For me, I'm more of an optimistic person. So, and when I looked at her work, and she was really showing us everything, the whole process, she was extremely generous in her approach. And I was really taken aback by her generosity. And I thought to myself, I am not really gonna follow everything she was showing us. I don't want to do the paper approach. I want to do my own thing. And I was thinking maybe I want to cover mine with fabric or weaving or something like that, because I don't want to show art that looks exactly like hers.
Take it
But
and make it your own, right?
you want to you definitely want to see her work. Her last name is Vogel, Vogel. The other artist that I'm doing basketry with, she's an amazing because this is my passion. This is what I got actually for my birthday from my sister. She gave me this little basket, Nantucket basket for a necklace yesterday. She's a lady who lives in Australia, and her name is Harriet Goddell. And again, I can pass that information to Zvi if you're interested in traditional basketry. And she is just a well of information. And she started with how to start with the cordage, and how you will do your cords, and how you start weaving traditionally, and how you move into more of a modern basketry. Everything that I shot on that image, practically, I learned from her. And she moved into a little bit of wiring, or like how to do the wire, and leather. She covered a lot in a very short period of time in an online course that you can keep for the rest of your life. The course is called From Form to Freedom. But again, I can pass that information to you. Thank you for your interest.
So I want to thank all the artists that showed up, by the way, because each presentation was so incredibly different and diverse in material and subject matter. And so it was very exciting. You have pieces at Old Schwab Mill, those two of those pieces that are really gorgeous, and thank you for that. Zvi, I have one point for you.
Can I have a
And
question? Can I?
hang on a sec, hang on.
Thank you.
Your piece event. I actually like that it's not perfect. I don't want you to make that perfect.
Me too.
It should not be
Yeah,
totally
yeah, I love
symmetrical.
it.
The way it is, it looks like an octopus, or it's so much more organic than if it was perfect. So I think don't try to perfect that.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. That was my
Thank
talk.
you.
Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, sorry, this is back to Banana. You know, I spent quite a bit of time in North Yemen. So Ilahan Salankif Halak Handila. And I honestly loved your work. I had written a couple of little questions about I wanted to ask you. I really liked the fact that you I mean, I was curious about how you shifted the Asian connection. I mean, how you love that, you know, it's a very different culture. And I was curious to know how that happened. Let's see, I wrote myself a question or two. I love The Truth Doesn't Change, loved that. I loved your use of piano pieces because it's, but I mean, your work is so deep, politically connected. I mean, it's quite inspiring, to be honest. And I loved It's a New Day. That was a great piece, by the way. And so I was curious about what was it about, you know, the Asian connection? Because I know I'm Celtic. When I went to Japan for the first time, I was like blown away because a lot of it felt like my world, ancient, stone, culture, story. I was just curious to know how that connection happened for you. What was it?
That's
The bamboo and
that's a very deep question for me, because I think in 1994, I got a Fulbright scholarship and I came here. But for me, it changed my life because I was literally escaping the Middle East because I was in a horrific marriage and I just wanted to survive, not only just to come here for a scholarship. And I turned my back on my culture. And my culture, you don't change your last name. Perhaps that's the only thing you keep. You can keep your last name. You don't have, when you get married, you don't have to change your last name. I changed my last name. It was for me. It was like I was such a rebel that I didn't want even to remember anything about my religion or culture or language. I was so hurt there that I wanted to forget about everything there and immerse myself in this culture. And I thrived here. I think I was born here. Everything before that, I didn't know who I was because there was so much oppression. They want to treat you like a child where you don't know who you are, and they treat you. They want to control your mind and your way of thinking, your way you're dressed, the way you speak, the way you think, the way you express yourself. So you don't know who you are. They make you think you know who you are, and they pretend that they're giving you freedoms, but you don't. So once I came here, I flourished and I knew who Baida is. This is, in my mind, I was born in August 1994 when I came to America. And that's why I'm in love with America. But then gradually, after living here, and when the politics changed, I start to see a different slice of the American culture and American. It was a shock to me to see actually a new America that I was not aware of. And that was very disappointing to me. That this country that I love, what happened to it? In what way I can see this country sliding to become another Syria or another Kuwait that I was raised in, or another Middle East that I ran away from. So that's why I'm horrified, and I'm looking at it and I see, how can I stop that? How can I bring people, the awareness? But let's leave politics to one side and go back to your question about, for me, when I left all of that, I needed to hang on to something else, which is the American culture. And then when I was in England, I left this country and I went to England and I lived there for about 10 years before I came back here. I was in one of the shops and I'm looking at art books, and then I found this book about Asian art, Chinese brush painting, and I looked at it, and I'm doing all sorts of art. And just, I looked at these images and I thought, oh my gosh, something hit me. And I said, this is just unbelievable. This art, I don't think I can teach myself this. This is something that somebody has to teach me. I took the book, but there is nobody in Lincolnshire, where I was, who can teach me this stuff. So I put it on the shelf until I came back to here to the States, to Worcester. And there was a wonderful lady called Sharon Smith-Viles at the Worcester Art Museum, was teaching Chinese brush painting. I immediately enrolled and I started teaching. And after a few years, she grew old, and she said, there is nobody who can actually keep this form of art alive except you. She passed the students and the brushes to me, and I carried on teaching this form of art. I absolutely loved it. And it shows actually, so I felt like there is something for me who did not really believe in the Islamic type of life and culture that I was brought into. I found an oasis for me to thrive, because I feel this is where I belong. I belong in nature, and I belong in wood, and I belong in forest. I belong in things that I was deprived from. Being a woman, to go out in the woods and hide by myself, this is a no-no, so I really love this type of way of thinking, and it's just it's some kind of a religion, a way of religion, maybe because it is a part of Buddhism, but then as a religion, I can't really belong to that type of religion. So I loved it. And all of a sudden, when I got this, because I'm interested in Arabic away from religion, from Islam, when I got the scholarship, I found myself going back peacefully into my roots again, knocking on that door again, and trying to figure out what is so beautiful about my past and my culture and my religion and my memories that I can embrace away from all the oppression that they posed on me, that I can actually like and cherish and honor and put back into my art. And it shows now in my art one more time, and I'm at peace, I think.
Thank you.
That's a great answer. Gosh, I'm going to call you separately, because I was in Damascus, 1980. You probably might have been born. Anyway, this has been a wonderful evening. Thank you
Thank
to
you.
everybody.
Thank you for the question.
Dom, you had a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. Yeah, it's more of a question for everybody that presented. First of all, I think all your work is everybody who presented was just amazing, and I that's coming through. But I think Ida already kind of spoke about like why her art is so important to her and what makes her kind of tick and passion. But I'd love to hear from Sean Z and Carla, like if you were to give me like a 20-second of what is your body of work about, you know what I mean? Like if you were to if someone were to put you on the spot and you were to just basically tell them in 20 seconds, what is the passion, what is, I don't know, it could be a description of the material that comes out. I'm not sure what it is, but for each one of you. So I don't know if you can kind of maybe go in the order that you presented would be great. And if you just keep it short would be great. Thank you.
The central theme of my work is water in motion. So with every idea that I chase, I try to find like a gazillion ways, different ways of showing water in motion. Yeah, pretty much that's it in a nutshell, water in motion.
I'd say for me, it's the interaction of shapes, but more so the interaction of the observer. A lot of my work is large scale, so I really want to force the issue on people to really take a look at it and be able to walk up to it and walk around it and kind of be a part of it. I guess it comes from my kind of history of working for a lot of, public monumental kind of works with other artists I've worked with over the years, and it's kind of rubbed off on me. So I really want that kind of immersion into it.
Okay. Great. Z, any thoughts there?
Typically, I shy away from these questions that ask for.
Yeah, I know,
one-
because like,
one sentence
and I
definition,
get
but
that because
I'll
the art
be-
is up to the viewer. So I mean, and
I'll be
I don't mean
comfortable
to
to
put you on.
say, I'll be comfortable to say that I think if I have to summarize in 3 words, I think that my art, I feel, is an extension of myself. So whatever I feel, think, experience, it goes out. It goes out into my work.
That's great, actually.
Yeah, very good.
I had a question for Carla. When you're talking about your work and you're saying you're drawing on it, like the pieces behind you, I can see there's that kind of white drawing part on it. What are you drawing with?
It's an oil-based pen. The head of it is like the size of the head of a pin. So it literally is polka dots. I have to have really good polka dotting music. It's almost like this Zen thing that happens, but at the same time, I have to be extremely mindful of every single mark because there's no erasing. And if I make a mistake, I have to incorporate that mistake into the piece. But that goes back to, sometimes I think the better pieces are the ones that you struggle with. The ones that have something marred in there, something that you have to work around. And yeah, even if there was a way of like, sometimes you can wipe it fast enough, but because it's oil-based, it actually creates a little bit of
like a smear or something.
Well, a smear, but it actually affects the plastic, the plexi. So because the work is all about light and shadow, once it's up on a wall and the light's going through it, even if there is an ink there, it's going to register a mark.
Right.
So I've just learned to embrace the flaw and say that it's intentional.
Do you kind of have a game plan going into it on the layout, or is it kind of just happen organically filling the space?
It's mostly organic, but I do try to visualize a shape or a pattern, a flow before I start. And I will make a couple of little marks here and there just to remind me that in general, this is where I wanted to go. And then I'll do sort of a basic line of polka dots that run through it, just to give myself the parts to then work beyond.
Right.
So everything is additive. Anytime there's like, say, a shape like this, Now I have to kind of build all these different shapes onto it.
That makes sense. Beta, I had a question for you too.
Can I add it? Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Karen. I just had it's quick kind of comment. Love your work, love the weaving and the kind of different cultural elements kind of mashed together. As said before, there's kind of juxtaposition of them, which is wonderful. Are you familiar with Ruth Asawa?
Of course,
Yeah, I was going
love
to bring
your
that
work.
up.
Yeah,
That's so
I mean,
funny.
it reminded me
Oh my
somewhat of
God.
her work, and that kind
Oh,
of
thank
the
you.
wire sculpture undulating forms are just wonderful. So I
Have
see
you
that.
ever seen her work in live? I mean,
No,
it's
I
amazing.
anybody?
haven't. I'd
Oh
love
no,
to.
yeah, I saw it in San Francisco.
Mm.
That's funny, Sean. I was going to bring that up because she is amazing. I mean, I think she died at
She
94.
died, I think, yeah.
Thir-
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
2013, I think, or 14.
Oh,
Not too
right,
long
right,
ago.
right. But just because as an artist too, just a quick thing. I always ask anyone who's asked me to do commission to give me their playlist because I'm big into music, and I always listen to music when I do my work, and I ask my clients to give me their playlist. This is I'm giving away one of my big moments.
Industry secret.
I am, but that's okay to share because you know what? My dad just died 2 weeks ago. And
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Sorry.
that's fine. It's okay. He was 96. And we listened to the Queen. I mean, the Queen died. My dad was in lockstep with the Queen. And we listened to all the music. And I had to choose all the music for the funeral. But I realized music is such a big part of our lives. And I know any commission I've ever had, I am sharing my little thing. But it's a nice moment. If anybody asks you for a commission, ask them for the playlist.
I like that
Because
idea.
I've had a
too.
few years where I've had 3 commissions, 3 different people. I want to be able to be completely involved in what I'm doing for them. And I feel it's another way in. And you're listening to that music when you're doing the work for that person. And I think it's a little gem. I'm happy to share it. I mean, I've never heard anybody sharing this, but I would have, you sure will do it. When somebody says, create something for me, and you say, give me your favorite music. So when you're creating that piece for them, you're going to be listening to the music that they love. And I've had a few situations where there's like 5 members in the family, and give me your playlist individually. And then you'll find the right, it's a Venn diagram, right? It's like, okay, there's going to be 3 or 4 tunes, and you're going to be channeling the family when you're creating the piece for them. And it's a much more intimate, mindful way to do a commission.
Okay, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm sorry, did I steal all the time?
I just want to ask one final question, if I may. We changed the format this time where the discussion group was at the end for everybody. I found it more stimulating and more engaging. Everybody stayed till the last minute. And I like to continue with that format. Just nod your head if you agree with that.
I
All
think
right, I see more nods. Good. So I appreciate that. So this is 90 minutes into the call. I think we need to wrap up. Everybody has other things hopefully to do this evening. So again, I really appreciate all the presenter and everybody who came to attend and the wonderful discussion that ensued. I will record, this is being recorded, and a link to the recorded session will be provided on our website in a couple of days. Give me a couple of days. So see you next scalp scan in a month, and you'll see the notes coming about. And until then, have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Hopefully
Zvi,
we'll
for
see
your
you next
time.
Have a
weekend.
good
Thank you,
night,
everybody.
everyone. Happy birthday, Beta.
Thank
Say
you so
happy
much.
birthday.
Thank you, Carla.
Happy birthday.
Lovely work, everybody. I'm really impressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Same,
Bye,
I enjoyed
everybody.
this.
Bye, guys.
Bye.